And it doesn't come off as that blunt and that bold, but honestly, that is what you do when you initiate conversation. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today I wanted to talk about vulnerability. And the reason I wanted to talk about this particular subject is because I've had some interesting conversations surrounding this idea over the last day and a half or so. And I had a conversation with my mom and my younger sister, and then I also had a conversation with my stepsister earlier today about the same topic, and I thought I would share this concept with you guys as well, because I do think there's some value in understanding the value of vulnerability and why it is so challenging at times to be vulnerable, and at the same time why it is that we crave and seek people who can be vulnerable. And part of the reason why this subject came up is because I have a particular individual in my life, and I'm not going to state who, but this particular person has a tendency to tell me that I'm cold and aloof and distant and, like essentially an ice queen. And it hurts every time that they say that. And for a long time I've thought maybe they're right, or maybe they're looking at a version of me from the past and projecting it onto the future. But through the discussion I had with my mom and my little sister, I actually started to realize that this individual might very well be projecting themselves on me, as in they recognize this issue within themselves on some level, and so they are kind of pushing it off, saying it's your fault, not mine. And that kind of comes back to the blame game concept, where you start to blame other people so that you don't have to deal with it. You don't have to confront the issue. You don't have to face it. You don't have to change yourself or, grow. You can say that it's on the other person and then just leave it at that. The problem is it's very, very frustrating and hurtful being on the receiving end of somebody saying that, and it is a fantastic way of destroying any potential relationship, because when you call somebody icy or cold or aloof, you're essentially telling them that I am going to see you this way for the rest of our conversation. So whatever you share, I'm not going to take seriously. I'm not going to view as something that actually matters. I'm going to take it as this is something that you're either irritated by or something you don't really care about, and that's why you're sharing it with me. Which therefore means that if I do express my heart to this person, I end up getting crushed because they don't take it seriously. They don't view this as an actual issue or an actual challenge that I'm facing, and they kind of take it with a grain of salt. And I'm like, but this is actually really important to me. Like, I genuinely wanted to share this. I genuinely wanted to connect with you, and now that possibility has been completely shut off. So for me, I definitely seek connection, and because of that, it's virtually impossible for me to be shut off and aloof and cold all the time, because I genuinely want to understand the other person. I genuinely want to see the other perspective. And while I'm not always the best at being super excited or, expressing the emotions that I'm feeling at any particular moment, I don't believe that I am aloof or distant. It's just I merely cannot always switch between analysis and emotion at a moment's notice. If you're expressing whatever's going on in your life and then I'm responding to your situation. I'm not really thinking about me in that particular moment. So then when the conversation switches back to me, it takes me a minute to switch back over to refocus on me rather than on you. Which can at times seem like I'm being distant or aloof, if in fact I do seem that way at all to anybody, which I can't be sure of. Most people don't say anything of the sort, so I have a hard time believing that that is genuinely something that I project. But knowing that it does take time to switch back from focus on other to focus on the self, it can help you understand what exactly is going on with me, and it might be able to help you understand what might be going on with you as well. So when it comes to expressing vulnerability, essentially what you're doing is you're putting yourself out there. And one of the things that came up in my conversation with my mom and my little sister was the concept of, in friendships, it's generally been my role to be the initiator in conversations, and I find this quite frustrating at times. And the main reason I think this is frustrating is the same reason why a lot of men have challenges in their marriages where they feel like they're just an ATM to their wife or to their children or whatever the case may be. They don't understand, like, if somebody genuinely cared about them, like, why they're doing this or behaving in that way. And that's why it's so much harder. Like, if you get married to somebody who has a lot of money, when you don't, then they might, to a certain extent, always wonder if you married them for their money, kind of thing. The same goes for being the initiator of conversations in relationships, where it's okay to be the initiator a few times, but if the other person never reciprocates, never puts their own effort in, never expresses their vulnerability, then you start to wonder, like, do they genuinely care about me? Do they care about our relationship at all? Am I the only one that's invested in this? And I think that actually hit a very true note with me after I heard that concept, because essentially what is happening is when you initiate a conversation, you are in some way telling somebody, hey, I like you and want to get to know you better. And it doesn't come off as that blunt and that bold, but honestly, that is what you do when you initiate conversation. And even if the other person doesn't want to talk to you, it hurts a little bit when they just dismiss you entirely or blow you off or whatever the case may be. So if you ask them to hang out or you talk to them about a particular subject and they just give you like a one-word answer or completely blow you off, you're like, ouch, that stung a little bit. But because you weren't expecting, like a huge investment during that conversation, it's a slight sting. Whereas when you get further into a relationship and this becomes a pattern or a habit, when that time comes where the person actually tells you that they don't care, it's going to hurt a lot more, because you've invested so much time, energy, you've expressed to this person on many different occasions that you like them and want to know them better, and they never responded, and now here you are invested with somebody who is not invested in you, and the backlash from that can be crippling and devastating. So, as somebody who is an initiator, I am often put in this position where I'm like, do I care more about the other person? Or do I care more about this relationship than the other person does? And that's not always true, because there are people who I have talked to who tend to initiate the conversations. The difference being that when they do that, I genuinely do everything that I can to be in that present moment and to respond and be attentive. And when the friendship kind of falls apart later on, I don't think it's particularly devastating to either of us, because it's not like I said, no, I don't want to hang out with you, or rejected them in any way. It's just, for whatever reason, they weren't comfortable initiating, and I didn't see any need to either. If that person had continued to form a relationship with me, I would have had to come to some point in time and make a decision about whether I was going to invest in that relationship too, or if I was just going to kind of end it beforehand. And I think this is part of the reason why romantic relationships are not something that I enter into often, because I am so extremely dedicated to my friends and whatnot, and I need that reciprocated level of attentiveness and investment, and most of the time in a potential romantic relationship, that just doesn't exist. One person usually cares more, and that's not going to work for me. So, this is a challenge at times. So, that whole concept of being vulnerable through being the initiator in a conversation was kind of a new one for me. But then, today, when I talked to my stepsister about vulnerability too, she actually came up with another concept that I thought was hugely helpful in my understanding, which is there are two kinds of vulnerability, at least. There could be more, but at least there are two kinds of vulnerability. The first kind of vulnerability is kind of like your heart vulnerability or your emotional vulnerability. where you're expressing things that hurt you, you're expressing the depth of your desire, you're expressing your dreams and your goals. That's a kind of emotional or spiritual or heart vulnerability. But there's also a physical vulnerability, and that comes across in, like being seen naked or dancing or just your appearance, things like this, wearing shorts. All of these things are minor expressions in some ways, if they are minor at all to you, of physical vulnerability. And it was interesting to me to talk to my stepsister about this, because she is much more comfortable with the physical vulnerability side, and I am much more comfortable with the emotional, spiritual, heart kind of vulnerability, and very uncomfortable with the physical vulnerability side. So, like, for me, physical touch has been actually quite rare in my life. And just recently, like over the past couple years, I've been trying to be more affectionate, physically speaking, like giving hugs, touching people on the shoulder, high fives, little things that help to move that physical vulnerability bar a little bit further out, so that I'm more comfortable and willing to express the physical vulnerability side. Yet another reason why I'm not all that common in romantic relationships, because romantic relationships involve, on average, a lot of physical vulnerability, and that is something that I am still working on developing. So, if you look at this whole concept of vulnerability, you really start to see a new kind of level in a relationship that you might not see otherwise. And this is something that has always been kind of funny to me, because I've been told on a couple occasions I need to get more friends. But the people that tell me I need to get more friends, it seems to me like their level of friendships is not a connection kind of friendship. It's like they just spend time with these people. It's a way to waste time, and essentially, a way to waste time. And what I'm looking for is the heart connection. I'm looking for the soul to soul connection, looking for that genuine exchange, looking for somebody who's willing and able to be vulnerable back and be as invested in the relationship as I am, or at least invested in the relationship and interested in keeping it moving. I don't know if you could ever fully say whether two people are equally invested, or compare their level of investment either. It's kind of like when couples say I love you, and then the other one says I love you more, and I'm like, that's probably not a good thing, because you're getting into a competition, and love is not a competition. So similar thing there. When it comes to investment in relationships, you don't want to make it a competition. But you do need reciprocal affection. You do need both sides putting effort into the relationship. That doesn't necessarily mean that both parties put equal amounts of investment into the relationship, but both parties have to be willing to put energy and effort into it in order for a relationship to work and last and be deep and have a strong emotional connection and reliance and be able to express vulnerability, which personally I think is what we're all looking for. We're all looking for the people who we can be vulnerable with and who will be vulnerable with us, because we really want to have that kind of deeper connection. And I think that it might be much rarer in our world than I originally thought, because these kinds of connections, while not all over the place in my life, have pretty much existed in some form or another. Like I've had best friends. I have a really close connection with my mom and my younger sister, at the very least, currently. And, I've had several different best friends throughout my life who I was able to be fully me and express all of me with, and people who are willing to express the struggles and the joys and thrills of their lives, too. So, I've been very blessed with these individuals, and I'm very grateful to have had them. And, when those relationships fall apart, it does hurt. It is like losing somebody that matters a lot. but at the same time, I'd much rather have that close connection and have it end than never experience that and never get hurt as a result either, because the hurt is worth the joy in my eyes. So that's kind of all I wanted to talk about today. Vulnerability is definitely an interesting concept, and it's surprising to me how it's not as important to some people as it is to me. Part of this, I'm sure, has to do with the life experiences that I've had versus what other people might have experienced, and the way that my life experiences have affected me versus how they may affect other people had they gone through the exact same thing. So, it could be wholly unique, but it is interesting to me that not everybody wants the same kinds of things from a relationship, or that not everybody is as willing to express their heart or to be open and be vulnerable just as a human being, expressing at least some level of vulnerability right from the start through initiating conversations. It also never occurred to me before these discussions that it takes a great deal of bravery to be the individual who initiates conversations. So, to all you guys out there who ask girls on dates, I commend you. I get it now. I get that it takes a huge amount of bravery to ask somebody out. And even for me, in a non-romantic capacity, it is challenging for me to initiate contact with somebody who I'm not sure is going to respond. So I definitely commend you. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to click the like button and subscribe to the channel, and then click the notification bell so that you are notified when new videos are posted. If you are willing and able, please head on over to my Patreon page and become a subscriber there. I would love to have you and your support. And last of all, if you have any questions, comments, or video ideas, concepts that you wish that I would talk about in future videos, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and then I will do my best to respond appropriately. So, thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon. Bye.